Excuse me, you can't loiter here. Bank opens at 9 a.m. I'm not loitering. I work here. Work here doing what? Security? Maintenance? I run this place. You run what now? The homeless shelter down the street. No, officer, I run this bank. I'm the president. Move along before I arrest you for trespassing. I'll make you pay for this.
At 7:15 a.m. on a crisp October morning, Victor Kane stood outside the main branch of First National Bank, clipboard in hand, observing customer traffic patterns as part of his monthly operational review. He'd been doing these surprise inspections for 6 years as bank president, but Officer James Pierce didn't know that. All Pierce saw was a black man in jeans and a polo shirt who didn't belong in the financial district. The confrontation that followed would destroy Pierce's career, trigger a federal investigation, and cost the city millions in the largest racial profiling settlement in the state's history. Quick pause. I love seeing how global our community is getting. Let me know in the comments, which part of the world are you tuning in from today? Also, if you value independent storytelling that digs deeper for the truth, please hit that subscribe button. Your support is the only way we can keep exposing these untold stories. Victor Kane had built First National Bank from a struggling community institution into one of the region's most respected financial organizations. At 43 years old, he represented everything the American dream promised. A kid from the projects who'd earned his MBA from Wharton, worked his way up through regional banks, and finally achieved the corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city's financial district. His Tuesday morning routine never varied. Every month, Kane would arrive unannounced at different branches, clipboard and pen in hand, observing operations before employees expected management oversight. He'd watch customer interactions, note security protocols, evaluate efficiency. These inspections had revolutionized First National's customer service ratings and operational standards. That October morning, Kane wore his typical inspection attire: dark jeans, a green polo shirt, and comfortable walking shoes. He deliberately dressed down during these visits to see how staff treated customers who didn't look like typical high-net-worth clients. The strategy had exposed several instances of discriminatory service that Kane had swiftly corrected. Standing outside the main branch at 7:15 a.m., Kane made notes about the building's external appearance, lighting adequacy, and accessibility features. The morning was crisp, with autumn leaves scattered across the sidewalk. Early commuters hurried past, most clutching coffee cups and checking phones. Kane smiled, remembering when he'd been one of those rushing figures, climbing corporate ladders before building his own. Officer James Pierce had been patrolling the financial district for 7 years. At 38 years old, Pierce prided himself on knowing who belonged in his territory and who didn't. Banks, investment firms, and corporate offices attracted a certain demographic, mostly white professionals in business attire, arriving between 8:30 and 9:00 a.m. When Pierce spotted Kane at 7:15, every assumption in his mental database triggered alerts. Black, male, casual clothing, loitering near financial institution, taking notes, potential robbery surveillance. Pierce had made these calculations hundreds of times during his career. His arrest statistics impressed supervisors. His proactive interventions had earned commendations. His instincts, he believed, kept the financial district safe from criminal elements. Pulling his patrol car to the curb, Pierce stepped out with the confidence of someone convinced he'd identified a threat before it materialized. His hand rested casually near his radio. As he approached Kane, who was absorbed in writing observations about customer entrance patterns. "Excuse me, you can't loiter here. Bank opens at 9 a.m. Kane looked up from his clipboard, immediately recognizing the tone he'd heard directed at other black professionals in similar situations. His expression remained calm, but internally he braced for an encounter he'd hoped would never personally experience. "I'm not loitering. I work here." Pierce's eyes swept over Kane's casual attire, noting the absence of security uniform, maintenance company logos, or any visible identification. His assumptions hardened. Work here doing what? Security? Maintenance? The question carried implicit limitations. Pierce couldn't imagine a black man in casual clothes holding any position beyond support services. Kane felt the familiar sting of reduced expectations, but maintained his professional composure. "I run this place." Pierce's expression shifted to barely concealed amusement. In 7 years of financial district patrol, he'd never encountered a black bank executive, much less one dressed like a weekend customer. "You run what now? The homeless shelter down the street?" The racist assumption hit Kane like a physical blow. Here stood a police officer, sworn to serve all citizens equally, openly mocking the possibility that a black man could lead a major financial institution. "No, officer, I run this bank. I'm the president." Pierce's amusement transformed into irritation. He'd encountered plenty of suspects who fabricated impressive credentials to avoid scrutiny. This was just another variation of the same game. "Anyone can claim to be president. Move along before I arrest you for trespassing." Kane realized this situation was escalating beyond reason. His 6 years of leadership experience, his MBA, his track record of transforming First National's performance, none of it mattered to Officer Pierce, who saw only skin color and made instant judgments about belonging. The morning sun climbed higher, casting longer shadows across the sidewalk, where two men stood locked in a confrontation that would soon spiral far beyond either man's expectations. Pierce, certain he was preventing crime, prepared to arrest someone he considered a vagrant with delusions of grandeur. Kane, knowing exactly who he was and what he'd achieved, faced the reality that his accomplishments meant nothing to an officer whose worldview couldn't accommodate successful black leadership. Neither man could have predicted that this conversation would end careers, trigger federal investigations, and ultimately cost taxpayers millions of dollars. But as Pierce reached for his handcuffs and Kane stood his ground outside his own bank, the wheels of consequence began turning toward a collision that would expose the devastating cost of assumptions based on race. Pierce stepped closer, his hand moving to the handcuffs on his belt. 7 years of patrol experience had taught him to recognize when verbal warnings weren't enough. This suspect was clearly planning something. Why else would someone be taking notes outside a bank before opening hours? "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification." Kane reached slowly into his back pocket. Pulling out a leather wallet, he extracted his driver's license and a business card, handing both to Pierce with steady hands despite his growing frustration. Pierce glanced at the license. Victor Kane, age 43, address in the city's upscale Riverside district. The business card read, "Victor Kane, President and CEO, First National Bank." Pierce examined it briefly, then handed both items back with a dismissive shake of his head. "Anyone can have business cards printed. I can get one made that says I'm the governor. That doesn't make it true." Kane's professional composure cracked slightly. "Officer, you can verify my identity in 30 seconds. Call the bank's main number. Check the website. My photograph is on the executive leadership page." "I'm not calling anyone based on your instructions. You're loitering on private property with suspicious materials, and you're refusing to leave when ordered by police." "Suspicious materials? This is a clipboard with bank operational notes, and I'm not loitering. I own this building." Pierce's patience evaporated entirely. "Own this building? Stop lying and turn around." Kane took a step backward, his voice rising slightly but remaining controlled. "Officer, I'm not lying. My name is Victor Kane. I am the president of First National Bank. I have been conducting monthly inspections of our branches for 6 years. This is routine business activity on property that my institution owns." "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." "For what crime?" "Standing outside a building I own, taking notes about operational efficiency, being black in a financial district." Pierce reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I need backup at 45 Financial Plaza. I have a subject refusing to comply with lawful orders." Kane felt his heart rate accelerate. This was actually happening. A police officer was about to arrest him for conducting business at his own bank. He pulled out his cell phone. "I'm calling my security director. He can verify." "Put the phone away. No phone calls." "I have the right." "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." Pierce grabbed Kane's wrist, spinning him around and pushing him face first against the bank's glass exterior wall. The handcuffs clicked shut with metallic finality. Kane's clipboard and pen scattered across the sidewalk. "You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you." Kane pressed his face against the cool glass of his own bank, feeling the weight of handcuffs for the first time in his life. Through the window, he could see the lobby where his portrait hung alongside other executive leadership photos. The irony was suffocating. "Officer Pierce," Kane said quietly, reading the name tag inches from his face. "You are arresting the president of this bank for standing outside his own building. When this is over, you will no longer have a job. Save the threats for your lawyer." A second patrol car arrived within minutes. Officer Rodriguez stepped out, surveying the scene with immediate confusion. He'd worked this district for 3 years and knew most of the regular business owners by sight. Pierce, what's the situation? Caught this guy loitering outside First National, taking notes, claiming to be the bank president, refused multiple orders to leave. Rodriguez walked closer, studying Kane's face. Something nagged at his memory. A community policing event, a business leaders meeting, a photograph in the local newspaper. Pierce, doesn't this guy look familiar? I think I've seen him at... I don't care if he looks like your uncle. He's trespassing and lying about his identity. At 7:45 a.m., Grace Clarkson pulled into the bank's employee parking lot for her usual early arrival. As the branch manager, she liked to review the day's schedule and prepare for staff meetings before regular business hours. Walking toward the employee entrance, she spotted police cars and a crowd gathering near the main entrance. Curious, she approached the scene and froze. There, handcuffed against the bank's front window, stood her boss, the man who'd hired her, mentored her career, and transformed First National into one of the region's most respected institutions. "Excuse me, officers," Grace called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to managing complex situations. "That's Mr. Kane, our bank president. Why is he in handcuffs?" Pierce turned toward her, annoyed at another interruption. "Ma'am, this individual was loitering and claims to work here. Can you verify employment?" Grace's expression shifted from confusion to outrage. "Verify employment? Officer, that's Victor Kane. He's the president and CEO of First National Bank. He's conducted monthly inspections here for 6 years. I report directly to him. Anyone can claim to know someone." "Officer, my name is Grace Clarkson. I'm the branch manager. Mr. Kane hired me personally. He approved my mortgage through this bank. His portrait is hanging in our lobby. Would you like me to show you his executive parking space with his name painted on it?" Rodriguez touched Pierce's arm. "Pierce, maybe we should..." "No, I'm not releasing someone based on claims from people who might be accomplices." Kane, still pressed against the glass, spoke quietly but clearly. "Grace, please call our legal department. Tell them to contact the mayor's office and the police chief immediately. Officer Pierce has arrested me for conducting business at my own bank." More early employees began arriving. The head of security, the assistant branch manager, 2 tellers who'd worked with Kane for years, all expressing shock and demanding Pierce release their president. Pierce found himself surrounded by a growing crowd of bank employees, all confirming Kane's identity, all demanding explanations. His certainty began to waver, but his pride prevented him from admitting error. "I don't care who says what, I'm not releasing anyone until my supervisor arrives to sort this out." Kane remained calm against the glass, but his mind raced through the implications. Security cameras were recording everything. Bank employees were documenting the incident on their phones. The media would inevitably learn that First National's president had been arrested outside his own institution. The damage to the bank's reputation could be significant. The damage to Kane's personal dignity was already complete, but the damage to Pierce's career, Kane realized, would be catastrophic and irreversible. As more police vehicles arrived and the crowd of witnesses grew, Kane understood that this moment would become a turning point, not just for him personally, but for conversations about racial profiling, institutional bias, and the assumptions that could destroy careers in a single morning. Sergeant Martin Kennedy arrived at 8:05 a.m. to find the situation spiraling beyond control. 23 years of police experience had taught him to assess scenes quickly, and what he saw immediately raised red flags. A well-dressed black man in handcuffs, surrounded by a crowd of professional-looking individuals all demanding his release, while Officer Pierce stood defensively explaining his actions. "Pierce, what exactly is happening here?" "Sergeant, I arrested this individual for loitering and making false statements. He claims to be the bank president, but..." "He is the bank president?" Grace Clarkson interrupted, stepping forward with her bank identification prominently displayed. "I'm Grace Clarkson, branch manager. This is Victor Kane, our CEO. He's been conducting routine inspections here for years." Kennedy studied Kane's face, then glanced at the growing crowd of bank employees, security guards, tellers, loan officers, all confirming the same story. His stomach began to sink. "Pierce, did you verify his identity?" "He showed me a fake business card and driver's license." "Fake?" Grace pulled out her phone, opening the bank's website. "Sergeant, here's our executive leadership page. Victor Kane, president and CEO." She held up the screen, showing Kane's professional headshot alongside his credentials and biography. Kennedy compared the photo to the man in handcuffs. Same face, same person, his 23 years of experience, screamed that Pierce had made a catastrophic error. Pierce, uncuff him. Now. But Sergeant, that's an order. As the handcuffs came off, Kane rubbed his wrists and turned to face the officers. His expression carried disappointment rather than anger, the look of someone who'd hoped better of the system he'd always tried to support. Mr. Kane, Kennedy began, his voice heavy with regret. I sincerely apologize. This should never have happened. Kane straightened his polo shirt and retrieved his scattered clipboard. Sergeant, I've been banking in this district for 15 years and leading this institution for 6. I've participated in community policing initiatives. I've donated to police benevolent funds. I've testified before City Council about supporting law enforcement. He paused, looking directly at Pierce, and Officer Pierce saw me standing outside my own bank and decided I must be a criminal. Not because of my actions, not because of any evidence, but because he couldn't imagine a black man legitimately belonging here. Pierce's face had gone pale. The reality of what he'd done was beginning to penetrate his defensive certainty. Kennedy pulled out his phone. I need to call the chief immediately. Yes, you do, Kane replied, because in about an hour, this story will be on every news station in the state. The bank president arrested outside his own institution, and Officer Pierce just became the poster child for everything wrong with racial profiling in law enforcement. Grace handed Kane his business cards, which had scattered during the arrest. Sir, should I cancel your 9 a.m. meeting? Kane looked at his watch, then at the growing crowd of onlookers recording with their phones. No, Grace. Business continues. But I suspect we'll need to schedule some additional meetings with our legal team and public relations department. The damage was done, the humiliation complete, and the consequences had only just begun. Within 30 minutes of Kane's release, the first news van arrived at First National Bank. By 10 a.m., the sidewalk buzzed with reporters, cameras, and microphones as local media descended on what would become the biggest story of the week. Channel 7's morning anchor thrust a microphone toward Kane as he emerged from an emergency meeting with his executive team. Mr. Kane, can you describe what happened this morning? Kane paused, choosing his words carefully. I was conducting routine business operations at my own bank when Officer Pierce arrested me for what he termed loitering and making false statements. I showed him my identification and business card. I explained my position. He refused to verify my identity and handcuffed me against my own building. How do you feel about the incident? I feel the same way any American would feel about being criminalized for existing in a space they legitimately occupy. The same way any business owner would feel about being arrested on their own property. The same way any black professional feels when their credentials are dismissed as impossible. The story exploded across social media within hours. Cell phone videos from bank employees showed Kane handcuffed against the glass while Pierce ignored mounting evidence of his identity. The hashtag #KnowingBanking, while black began trending before lunch. Police Chief Patricia Morrison called an emergency press conference at 2 p.m. Standing behind a podium flanked by American flags, she faced a room packed with reporters demanding answers. The incident this morning involving Mr. Victor Kane represents a serious failure in judgment by one of our officers, Morrison began. We have initiated a full internal investigation. Officer James Pierce has been placed on administrative leave, pending the outcome. Chief Morrison, what specific policies were violated? Our preliminary review suggests violations of departmental procedures regarding verification of identity, appropriate response protocols, and community policing standards. We're also reviewing whether this incident represents a pattern of behavior. Behind the scenes, Detective Sophia Collins had already begun pulling Pierce's personnel file for internal affairs review. What she found painted a disturbing picture. 17 formal complaints over 7 years. 14 involving interactions with black citizens in the financial district. 8 complaints specifically alleging racial profiling. Collins spread the files across her desk, studying a pattern that should have triggered intervention years earlier. Pierce had stopped black attorneys entering law firms, questioned black executives outside corporate offices, and detained black customers near upscale businesses. Each incident had been reviewed individually, with Pierce receiving counseling or additional training. No one had connected the obvious pattern. This is a systemic failure, Collins told her supervisor. We've documented Pierce's racial bias for 7 years and never addressed it comprehensively. At First National Bank, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. Chairman Robert Wells listened as Kane described not just the morning's events, but the broader implications for the institution's reputation and community relationships. Victor, the board stands behind you, Completely, Wells declared. We're issuing a statement condemning Officer Pierce's actions and announcing a comprehensive review of our community policing partnerships. The bank's communications director had fielded 43 media calls by afternoon. National outlets picked up the story. CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC all requested interviews. The Associated Press sent a photographer to document the scene where Kane had been arrested. By evening, protests began organizing outside the police station. The local chapter of the NAACP announced plans for a community forum. Civil rights attorneys started calling Kane's office, offering representation in what they predicted would be a landmark civil rights lawsuit. Pierce spent the day at home, watching his career disintegrate on live television. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, union representatives, and attorneys. His arrest of the bank president had become a national symbol of institutional racism in law enforcement. Mayor Jennifer Davidson issued a statement calling the incident unacceptable and completely contrary to our city's values. She promised a comprehensive review of police training and community relations policies. The consequences continued mounting throughout the evening. Pierce's picture appeared on newspaper websites alongside headlines about racial profiling and police accountability. Editorial boards began drafting opinion pieces. Community leaders scheduled meetings to discuss systemic reform. Kane worked late that night, fielding calls from colleagues, reviewing legal options, and preparing statements for tomorrow's inevitable media requests. The morning had started with a routine inspection and ended with his becoming the unwilling center of a national conversation about race, power, and assumptions. The real reckoning was just beginning. 3 weeks after his arrest outside his own bank, Victor Kane sat across from Mayor Jennifer Davidson in her City Hall office, flanked by attorneys from the ACLU and the region's most prominent civil rights law firm. The meeting that would determine Officer James Pierce's fate had arrived. Mr. Kane, the mayor began, we've completed our investigation. The findings are unambiguous and frankly disturbing. Detective Sophia Collins presented her internal affairs report. Pierce's 17 complaints over 7 years revealed a clear pattern of racial profiling that had somehow escaped comprehensive review. 14 incidents involving black professionals, 8 specific allegations of discriminatory treatment, 0 meaningful disciplinary actions. The department failed Mr. Kane and failed the community, Collins concluded. Officer Pierce should have been removed from street duty years ago. Chief Morrison delivered the verdict that everyone expected but Pierce had desperately hoped to avoid. Officer James Pierce is terminated from the police department. Effective immediately, his certification is revoked permanently. Pierce's union representative made a final, half-hearted attempt at appeal. Officer Pierce was conducting proactive community policing. Officer Pierce was conducting racial profiling. Morrison interrupted. For 7 years while we provided training that he ignored and counseling that he disregarded, this ends today. The termination letter was devastating and comprehensive. Pierce had violated departmental policies on identity verification, appropriate response protocols, and community relations standards. His arrest of Kane represented the culmination of a documented pattern of discriminatory policing that could no longer be overlooked. At 38 years old, Pierce's law enforcement career was over. His name entered the national database that would prevent him from obtaining police certification in any state. Background checks for any job would reveal his termination for racial profiling, his mortgage, his family stability, his professional identity, all destroyed by his inability to imagine a black man legitimately owning a bank. The civil rights lawsuit filed 6 weeks later sought $4.2 million in damages. Kane's attorneys argued that the arrest represented not just individual misconduct, but institutional failure to address documented racial bias. The city's legal team reviewed the evidence and reached an inevitable conclusion: the case was impossible to defend. Security footage showed everything. Pierce ignoring Kane's identification, dismissing his credentials, handcuffing him, despite growing evidence of his legitimacy. Bank employees testifying to Kane's identity. Pierce's refusal to perform basic verification procedures that would have prevented the entire incident. The settlement negotiations lasted 4 months. The city agreed to pay Kane $4.2 million, among the largest racial profiling settlements in state history. The amount reflected not just personal damages, but the institutional humiliation of arresting a prominent business leader outside his own building. Pierce received no portion of the settlement. His termination eliminated any city obligation to provide legal defense or financial protection. He faced the consequences alone: career destroyed, reputation ruined, family finances devastated. Kane used the platform created by his ordeal to advocate for systematic police reform. Speaking at the city council meeting where new training protocols were unveiled, he delivered testimony that resonated far beyond local government. "I was arrested for banking while black," Kane said, "for standing outside my own institution while black, for achieving success while black. Officer Pierce saw me and couldn't imagine legitimacy. He saw accomplishment and assumed criminality. He saw a black man in a financial district and decided I didn't belong." The reforms announced that day were comprehensive, mandatory racial bias training before any officer could patrol alone, automatic review procedures for officers accumulating multiple complaints involving racial discrimination, community oversight boards with authority to recommend disciplinary action, enhanced protocols for identity verification before arrests. Kane's bank implemented its own changes. Security cameras were upgraded to ensure future incidents would be documented in high definition. Staff received training on recognizing and reporting discriminatory law enforcement actions. The institution strengthened partnerships with civil rights organizations. Pierce disappeared from public view after his termination. No interviews, no statements, no attempts to rehabilitate his image. He'd become a cautionary tale about the cost of unchecked bias in law enforcement. First National Bank thrived under Kane's continued leadership. The incident, rather than damaging the institution's reputation, demonstrated its commitment to equality and justice. Deposits increased as customers appreciated the bank's support for their president during his ordeal. The broader impact extended well beyond one morning's confrontation. Pierce's termination sent a clear message that racial profiling would result in career destruction. Other officers with similar complaint patterns found themselves under increased scrutiny. The culture of accountability that Kane's arrest had demanded was slowly taking root. And if you believe documenting these moments matters, tap that subscribe button. We're not stopping the work, we're continuing to track the patterns, continuing to insist on better treatment, continuing to support the people who deserve safety without conditions. This isn't about a single authority figure or a single encounter. It's about the systems shaping how people are treated every day. Comment below with your thoughts on police reform and share this story if you think others need to see what accountability looks like when institutions finally decide to act.